Okay, guys, we're back. I'm George Mossey. I'm here with my co-host Marshana Dahlia for 90 Day Fiancé Season 6 Happily Ever After, The Tell-All Part 2 aired last night, and it was pretty crazy. So we're going to talk about Asuelo and Kalani's segment last night. So Asuelo reveals that he hadn't spoken to his mom or Tammy since the Christmas incident, which in everyone's eyes is completely normal, but in his culture, there's absolutely nothing your mother or father could do that will warrant you never speaking to them again. And then we even touched a little deeper that Tammy said that he put his hands on his mom, and Sean actually had to run the tape back. He did move her out of the door. So I'm actually torn because I don't ever want anyone to believe that I agree with anything that Tammy says. But I do feel like he should have apologized to his mother for removing her from the house. I know you're going to disagree with me, so let's just jump right in. Let's just go in.
Absolutely not. I love that Asuelo did not apologize. He physically removed his mother from the situation. He didn't fight her. He didn't push her. He didn't shove her. He physically took her and put her out of the house. If he had said to her, get out, get out, get out, was her and Tammy leaving? And it would have escalated to fisticuffs. It would have come to a fight. So I support him for supporting his wife and his family, which is what he should do. Okay? He is no longer only Tammy's brother and, Lucina's son. He's a father and a husband. He has different roles that he needs to play. And I'm sorry, your wife is your primary relationship and your children. You cannot come into somebody's house and behave that way. I don't care if you are their mother. I don't care if you are their sister. So no apologies needed to be given. I don't think that he was wrong for physically just carrying Tammy out of the house, and mommy too. Sometimes you have to do what needs to be done. Lucina and Tammy go way too far with their demands of money, loyalty. They want this level of, they want to say divorce your wife in front of his wife. The level of disrespect is just beyond me. And people need to know that there are boundaries and limits. I think that Asuelo picking them up, removing them from his home is an example of him defining clearly what his boundaries are and letting them know that you just can't cross them. Just because you're my mom doesn't mean you can cross my boundaries. Just because you're my mom doesn't mean you can disrespect my wife in our home. It cannot happen. And it's wild to me how weak some of these families are. I thought Lo was such a stand-up guy, and he is. But I'm surprised that in Lo's home that he pays for, him and his wife, you own this home, that these people were allowed to behave that terribly while you were right there. I feel like Lo could have said something. Kalani's mom could have said something. Kolini was the only one with any real heart other than Asuelo himself to really be like, we're not going to yell. I think we're done yelling. No? Okay, well, if you're talking, I'm talking too. Like, why do they allow people to bulldoze them in this way? There's a reason why Lucina and Tammy have gotten as far with their disrespect that they have. No one's really checked them along the way. Now is when Asuelo is trying to turn the corner and say, hey, you can't do that. But it's a lot too late.
I agree. I mean, everyone tweeted last night that they felt like Asuelo became a man last night. They said that last night he put his foot down and he said, look, you're not going to tell me to go have children with another woman in front of my wife. You're not going to. And Kalani really stepped it up because if you remember last season when they were on, Kalani said that this is not my family. I do not care for Asuelo, and I think my sister could do better. And she was planning a divorce party. So to see her complete 360 and say, this is my family, you will not disrespect my family, really showed that she is a ride or die sister. And she reminds me so much of me. Once I consider someone my family, blood means nothing. There's absolutely nothing I would not do to protect my family, whether you were born into my family or I picked you into my family. So I just feel that Kalani was the MVP of that scene, and she really showed that family is everything to her, and that's how she was raised. And it's obvious that they are not following that culture in Samoa. That is not the culture that Asuelo's family is actually using.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the real elephant in the room, the family of Libby's situation. Let's just jump in. So Chuck reveals right off the bat that he's fired Charlie from the business that Andrea is still employed in. So right off the bat, we knew that this is so far gone that we don't even know where to go because his son came into his home, immediately is attacked by Andre. He's screaming, swearing, disrespecting the home, has to be held back by 3 or 4 people trying to attack his child, and Chuck fires his son from the business. The lack of leadership and the lack of being a father is just appalling to me.
You know, I've said it before, and we both agree. Chuck is the weakest leader I have ever seen. He's a weak leader in business. He's a weak leader as patriarch of the family. When you have a weak leader, it creates a vacuum of power, and it creates people vying for power because they see that the leader is weak, and they want to exploit the leader for their own gain. According to Andre, he was telling Charlie in that moment when Charlie walked into his dad's house, you don't call the shots around here anymore. It's as if he's saying like, hey, there's a new boss in town. I tell you what to do. You sit down. You do this. You do that. And it's clear. And it's beyond me that he's able to say these level of things in front of Chuck, and Chuck does not say or do anything. It's like Chuck is asleep at the wheel. Last night, he's like, oh, we can get rid of Jen in front of Chuck. And the only words that Chuck could even muster to defend his own child, to defend his own position as the head of the company is, she's a very valuable asset to my business. That's all he said.
Right. No, she's my daughter, and no matter what, she's always going to be my daughter. That never came out of his mouth.
And you can't talk to my daughter that way. And you don't call the shots in my business. And if you keep running around acting like you're the head, you're about to get you're about to get cut. The fact that he would, like, Andre successfully wanted to usurp all of Chuck's children and make Charlie. Charlie was the biggest threat to him because Charlie is Chuck's son. And you know what? I do not like this. That last night, Andre tried to imply and allege that Charlie has a drinking problem, something that Charlie's own family seems to support. Even if that is true, that has nothing to do with the fact that you, Andre, have been manipulating his father in front of him and that he sees you for exactly who you are. You don't need to be sober, drunk, whatever the case may be, to be able to see the way that you manipulate. And I don't like when people exploit someone's weakness. If this is indeed a weakness of Charlie's, we don't know. But he's exploiting his weakness for his own personal gain. And I think that is a shame. I think it's a shame that his father sat there and let him do it and didn't come to Charlie's defense. You know, and Jen didn't necessarily come to his defense either. And also, I don't know what show a lot of people at home are watching, but some people challenged me last night on Twitter. You know, they were like, oh my God, Jen and them are scheming behind their dad's back to compete with him. Keep in mind, they were only put in the position to have to form their own business and go into direct competition against their father because Andre, all along, was scheming to get rid of them. They were pushed out and then they decided to band together. Why don't people see the root of things? Again, Libby is playing with fire. I really can't stand her. There was a very nasty, mean tweet last night that I saw. Gosh, and I hate reading mean tweets. I didn't even interact with the tweet because I don't like to do it. But the person pretty much said that Libby's the ugly duckling of her family, and she's married to this low-life loser like Andre, and she, you know, didn't have the options that her sisters had because they're more beautiful than she is, and she's gone and picked up this gutter swill, according to the tweeter, and now is using her leverage with her father because she's the baby and he feels sorry for her for their gain. And it's like, ooh, truer words have never been spoken. I don't want to be that mean person. But Libby, you are playing with fire. And I'm telling you, Libby, you watch this podcast and apparently so does Andre. Let me tell you something. Andre has unbridled anger and that can turn physical really fast. You need to be careful. You need to be really careful with what you allow your husband to do and say to you. And don't allow him to abuse you further, because he already emotionally and verbally abuses her. We've seen him do it. Don't allow him to abuse you further by alienating you from your family. That is a sign of abuse.
Absolutely. I actually agree with everything you said here. I believe that Libby has created an environment where this type of abuse is made possible for her and her family. She's letting her abuse not only her, but her family and turning her family against each other. I essentially see it as Andre has destroyed the family from the inside. He wanted to make sure that he turned each other against each other, because that's what you do. When there's a strong team against you, the only thing you can really do is turn that team against each other because they're no longer strong when there is such discord in the family. He's caused so much discord in the family that they've turned against Charlie. They've turned against each other, and everyone is an enemy at this point, making exactly what he wanted to happen. He is now second in command in a business that he has no right even being.
He is in command. Chuck didn't even stand up to him when he was like, oh, yeah, you go through with Charlie, right, Chuck? Chuck, you go through with Charlie. Andre calls the shots. Chuck is done.
Well, I feel like Andre got exactly what he wanted, and the sad part is the sisters knew exactly where this was going, and they were unable to stop it.
But what kills me is that TLC has all of the footage, right? They could really roll back. I feel like the way it was edited and the way that the questions and everything went last night was geared to make Charlie look like a bad person, and I really don't know what that was. TLC has all the footage. If they were to really roll back to how many seasons ago when we first met Libby and Andre was offered a job from Chuck in the company, and he did not take it. He said, I don't want him to hold things over my head. We don't need him. He made Libby and them move out of the house that, Chuck owned through the company and said, we're going to prove to him we don't need him. And then Libby had to go behind his back and ask her dad to pay the rent on a new place. Also, Andre could have the optics of appearing not to need Chuck. To all of a sudden now, him and Chuck are buddy-buddy. Him and Chuck are getting along. Chuck, forget all your other kids. It's only me and Libby. And also how he used the fact that he has to prove to immigration that he's working, because if not, for his green card renewal, he may have to go back to Moldova and take Libby and Elizabeth with them if he can't prove that he's working. So now all of a sudden that manipulates Chuck to be like, I need to come in and give him work so he can prove that he's working. He's had an opportunity this entire time to work. So I feel like if TLC wanted to run back that beautiful bean footage of all the years of manipulation, I think people would see it differently. But for some reason, they edit in favor of Andre, and I'm not really sure why.
I'm not sure either. I have no idea. And there's so many supporters of him online, and I can't understand it. All right, guys, that's wrapping it up. That is season 6 of Happily Ever After, the tell-all. That was part 2. That is it. And we don't know. Like, a lot of stuff is still up in the air, so I'm assuming there will be a season 7 so we can at least see where this goes, because a lot of stuff was just left up in the air. We don't know if Oswald is going to ever speak to his mother again. We don't know if Brandon and Julie are going to buy that house next to Betty and Ron. There's so much going on. So hopefully we'll find that out soon. Thank you guys for joining us, and make sure you're live tweeting with us. I'm at George Mossey. This is at Marshana Dahlia. Next week, 90 Day Fiancé The Other Way is premiering. Make sure you're there with us, and thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all real soon.